Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow doesn't want war with Ukraine. And speaking to Russian radio stations in the past hour, he made positive comments about security proposals received from the United States in an attempt to head off a Russian invasion of Ukraine. The US has urged China to use its influence with Moscow. Washington has also called for a meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what it called Russian aggression towards Ukraine. Mark Lobel has more.
In Belarus, to Ukraine's north, Russian arrivals for more training exercises, breathing life into fears they're not here just for that. Begging the question, is this a taste of things to come? Elsewhere spotted to Ukraine's south, it's Russian vehicles, possibly missile launchers, in annexed Crimea. Behaviour threatening enough to drive the US to advise its citizens to leave Ukraine. It's also demanding Germany walks away from this gas pipeline that would link it to Russia if troops roll in.
If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
Questions remain over how the US could stop it, but it's the kind of bullish talk one Northern European NATO ally thinks is their best bet at stopping an attack.
Putin understands and respects strength, and any sort of hesitancy is always viewed upon from Putin's side as weakness. So as we are speaking with Putin, we are also in the process of strengthening the NATO's position in the eastern flank.
America's also threatening Russia with heavy sanctions and is urging China to get behind efforts to stop an invasion. But some believe China will take any gas Russia can't sell to Europe.
China should be interested in a clash over Ukraine just because it would assure that Russia would remain China's ally almost, forever.
Talks between Russia and the West have warmed over arms controls in Eastern Europe, though that's seen as a secondary issue by Russia, with diplomatic channels still open. As this threat of war drags on, it's leaving Ukrainians like the rest of us guessing.
I'm even keeping a machine gun in the toilet now.
It all depends on the big boss in Moscow, but it's making us distressed for ourselves, for our children and grandchildren.
Further Western efforts to engage with Russia in the coming days from the French President Emmanuel Macron and at the UN Security Council may offer some answers as to what happens next. Mark Lobel, BBC News.
Well, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is still doing that question and answer session live with Russian radio stations. He keeps taking questions from various journalists who are talking to him remotely. Let's talk to our correspondent in Moscow, Caroline Davies. Caroline, talk us through the main threads of what he's been saying so far.
Morning, Karen. So far we've heard from Minister Lavrov. The first thing he said was, we don't want war, which of course many people would view as quite an encouraging sign given what we've heard a lot of discussions about. But of course it's not that surprising coming from Russia at the moment, who have always insisted that they are not the aggressors. They want a diplomatic path forward and that in fact this is all coming from the West. So we heard a lot more language that continued along that side, talking about hysteria coming from the West as well. But there was also some positive notes too. So Mr. Lavrov described the American response as an exemplary document of diplomatic courtesy, but he was not quite so kind about the NATO document, which he suggested was full of NATO pride. So we still don't have an answer about exactly how Russia will respond to these responses. However, we did hear from Minister Lavrov that he is planning to meet with Secretary Blinken in the next few weeks.
Caroline, we've also heard that the US has been urging China to get involved to try to use its influence with Moscow to sway the course of events, potentially. Have we heard anything from the Kremlin on that?
Nothing as yet directly from the Kremlin about this response about China and Russia's relationship, of course, which is fairly amicable and has a huge amount of sort of trade negotiations between the two. In terms of what might happen next, you would imagine that China's already said that they don't want to get involved with the sort of third-party issue here. And there's a suggestion, I'd imagine, that Russia would say we are pretty independent and might be quite dismissive of this suggestion from America. But as I say, we don't know about that yet.
Now, we've seen very little of President Putin himself in recent weeks. We do know, though, he is talking to the French President Emmanuel Macron a little later. What do we expect from that, Caroline?
Yes, so we know that President Macron wants to speak to President Putin and has said that he wants to raise these issues of what exactly are Putin's intentions in Ukraine. I think what's interesting with all of these talks is we've seen a lot of talks from Russia with individual countries as well as with NATO and with America. Now, some analysts have suggested that this is part of a Russian tactic of finding differences between different countries that are all allied to NATO, trying to create some sort of division within that body. However, that's why we've also heard an awful lot of language from America and from NATO talking about unity and having that alliance and keeping that alliance strong as well. But the most important thing, of course, with all of this is that talks are continuing, and any talk between President Putin and President Macron and any other of these leaders about peace and way forwards is seen as some form of hope.
Caroline, thank you very much. Caroline Davies there in Moscow. Let's also go back to what Sergei Lavrov is doing in Moscow. He is continuing that session with Russian radio journalists. He keeps taking questions. Most of them are on video links with him. And he has said during the course of that those significant words that Russia does not want war with Ukraine, but it will not allow its interests to be ignored. Now, Marko Mikkelsen is the chair of the Estonian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. He joined me a short while ago from Kiev, where he's been on a visit to Ukraine to learn about preparations for any potential invasion.
First and foremost, we have to understand that Ukraine is at war already for 8 years. And this makes the Ukrainian leadership, but most importantly, their command lead, very calm, self-confident, and they are prepared for worst-case scenarios.
And if they are not to face a worst-case scenario, there need to be, of course, diplomatic efforts continuing. The US Secretary of State promised that there would be serious diplomatic ways forward. What do you think those could possibly be for Russia?
First and foremost, obviously, Ukrainian leadership also seeking diplomatic solutions to this mounting threats to territorial integrity of Ukraine. But there is very little today to add up on. Yesterday, there was a meeting in Paris on Normandy format, but what I heard yesterday from presidential administration here in Kiev, there are little hopes that the kind of modest positive hopes that diplomatic track can be pursued in the future as well. But the positions of Kiev and Moscow, let's say, on how to solve the Russian aggression against Donbass and the situation in general on the borders of Ukraine, are very far apart.
That's Marko Mikkelsen of the Estonian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee.